The All Things Mentoring Lounge for January the 5th, 2022. Here we go. We're into the year 2022, and the lounge is open and ready for business. And we're going to be doing lots of episodes around the stories of mentoring, all things mentoring. And it's brought to you by the International Mentoring Community. And I am Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Certification for IMC. And on the call, we have...
My name is Doug Lawrence, and I'm the Director of Education and Outreach.
And the two of us are the co-founders of IMC, and we're bringing you this live broadcast of All Things Mentoring Lounge. And we're hoping that you're sitting back and enjoying yourself. We're going to be on board here for 30 minutes or so. If it goes to 40, and that might be bonus, but we certainly will be here for the 30. The main topic we're going to go over today is how to succeed at extraordinary mentoring using wise mentor practices. But just before we do that, we want to recognize it is a mentoring show, and it's about all things mentoring. And because it's about all things mentoring, you see I got that in 3 times there today, Doug?
That's good, yep.
There is a book coming out here. I'm just wondering if, Doug, you want to just let us know what that book is and just give us a quick update about what's happening. And I will be putting the link to our last live show where we talked with you about your book. But just in case someone's in new, what's going on with the book you got coming out?
The book is You Are Not Alone, and it is in pre-order state right now. So if our listeners want to acquire a copy of the book ahead of time, or at least reserve a copy, they can go through the pre-order process on the Amazon website. It's available on Amazon.com and Amazon.ca, so you'll be able to do that. We've had lots of great interest on the book trailer that was that we put together to help promote the book. So that's out there. Our listeners, if they're interested in viewing that, they can definitely go to YouTube and just search on You Are Not Alone, and you should be able to find the book trailer. It makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck every time I listen to it. So people will understand once they've taken a moment to go and listen to it. And the book is set to be live on the 17th of January.
Wonderful, wonderful. What would be the core topic area? Again, if people haven't heard about this so far, just so that they have a little bit something to click over in their minds.
So the book was written with the idea in mind of demonstrating that mentoring can be part of the support structure for mental health. And nowadays, there's such a huge need for resources that are part of that support structure that it's a natural fit for mentoring to be part of that structure.
Yeah. And I believe it's certainly something that's needed in today's world. There's lots of things that are going on where mentoring would be a great service. And I know that it's near and dear to your heart. And I believe that we're onto something here, and especially you're onto something with your book. But we are also supporting it through getting what's called a Journey Mentor certification to be able to support this story. And again, if that's of interest, you can always go to internationalmentoringcommunity.com and just read a little bit more about it and get a hold of us, and we'll be happy to help explain it a bit more and get you on board. So put in a good plug for IMC there as well. So thanks for that update, Doug. And I think it's important that maybe we just get into what our topic is today here about succeed at extraordinary mentoring using wise mentor practices. And this one came about because of a question that came in, and the question was around how not to fail as a mentor. And I always go, oh, hang on a minute, I think we need to reframe that. So I thought that it might be better is how to succeed at extraordinary mentoring using wise mentor practices than it is to use that sort of how not to fail as a mentor as you and the reason that I went down that path is because their question, what I call an avoidance pathway, the way that I've just shared the question is more of an approach pathway. And I believe it's better to approach something than it is to avoid something. And that's where Doug and I said, okay, let's do it from this perspective. After we always have chats about what we're going to do on the shows, what we came up with. So we're into very much an approach pathway for this presentation. Now, I think it's important to understand is that there are wise mentor practices as there are best practices. So I would just take mentor out of there. Best practices, wise practice. And I just want to highlight that before I ask Doug to talk about the mentor continuum. And that will become obvious because this will set up for our response to how to succeed. And the notion of best practices are the practices that others have come up with that you can tap into. So I could tap into them, I could bring them in. But what I have to do is I have to turn around and make them wise practices for me. And I say that because in the history of my work over the last 40 some years is that if I just adopt someone's practices, the best practices as is, often I and sometimes I fall. So it sort of went into a thinking process for me as I realized, okay, yes, I can accept the best practices, but how do I turn them into wise practices for me? How do I take that information knowledge and turn it into wisdom for myself? And therefore, when I share my wise practices, they can become sort of the best practice of someone else that they can become adept at adopting and adapting. And I know that Doug is one who is of deep practice, and you can tap into his wise practices for himself when he shares their best practices. And you always pick it up as we are going through our live shows and through our videos as well. But is there anything about wise practices, best practices that you want to mention at this point in time, Doug?
The only thing that I would touch on is that what I've found with my practice is that yes, there are best practices and there are wise practices. And what I've found is that when something becomes a wise practice, it becomes by de facto almost a way of life for you in how you go about approaching mentoring, how you engage with individuals, how you build those relationships, all of those things. It because it is a wise practice and it's almost like it's tailored or customized to you as the mentor, is that it just becomes a way of life.
Which is a good segue, I believe, into the notion of that continuum that we use in terms of good to extraordinary mentor. You want to just share a little bit about that? Because I think it will help to set up our responses to that question was asked of us.
Most definitely. So how we've approached this is we've looked at it from basically three aspects. So we've looked at it from, well, number one, it's all wrapped in the idea of effective mentoring, but it's broken down into sort of three categories, if you want to use that terminology. There's that of the mentor, there's the great mentor, and then there's the extraordinary mentor. And what it basically is, when it comes from the aspect of wise practices and that, is that it's a continuum where an individual may have a bit of an understanding of wise practices at the mentor level, but may not be able to fully understand and grasp those wise practices to be able to put them into where they're functioning. So then we take a look at the great mentor, and that's somebody who, you would like to have as a mentor because you've seen that there's something about them that just draws you to them, and they're somebody who understands wise practices and actually works at developing wise practices that are customized or tailored to how they deliver the mentoring process. And then finally, the last one is the extraordinary mentor, and that's someone who is an individual that we all wish that we could be mentored by that particular individual, because they get the wise practice concept, they get that, and they are an individual that is very humble, they're an individual who leverages storytelling almost constantly, and storytelling is a wise practice that they have adopted for themselves. They're also a student of process, of the mentoring process, so they're constantly learning. Every time they sit down and have a conversation with a mentee, they're enhancing their knowledge of the mentoring process. And so they become that student, and they're constantly striving to learn and grow. So, like, I tell people that every time they say, well, what's in this for you? And what I try to get people to understand is that every mentoring engagement or relationship that I have, I always take away from that something. It can be something about myself, it could be something about the mentoring process, and it most definitely can be something about the person that I'm working with in a mentoring relationship. So that, without getting into lot longer storyline, that's that's basically the continuum of mentoring as we've defined it. So mentor, great mentor, extraordinary, and I think we all aspire, or I hope we all aspire to become that extraordinary mentor where we can bring a deeper, richer mentoring experience to a relationship.
Yeah, and it's great that we are bringing this storyline. I know it's in the title of today's show, but it's really about helping people move into that extraordinary approach to mentoring, which is why, from an IMC point of view, we've chosen to use what's called a verification process, which is our way to actually confirm the concepts and practices of the mentor rather than just sort of doing, oh, you've written an exam, you got 80 out of 100 on the exam, I think we'll give you your certification. We actually dive into there and really look at the phenomena of mentoring and how that person is using it. That's the extraordinariness, that's the wiseness that we're attempting to bring forward. So I think that what we're going to do is we're going to dive into a little bit of our own deep practice here, right? Again, these are our wise practices that we're presenting. You could take them as best now, and again, see what you would like to use of them. And I think that, Doug, you've got one that you want to start off with here. So what's the first one that you want to share with us? Then we've got 4 more. So we're going to go over 5 in total.
So the one that stands out for me the most is listening and hearing. And the idea behind that is, you know, we say that, yes, I heard what you said, but did you actually hear what I said? And so the mentor needs to make sure that they're always in that constant state of listening and hearing what their mentee is saying, because what we don't always realize is that within the conversation that you're having, there are hidden messages, there are trigger words, there's trigger phrases that are going to guide you on the path of having an effective conversation or effective communication with an individual. You're going to be guided by their responses and stuff. And one of the things that I tell people that I've learned a lot from working with people that are dealing with mental health challenges is that there are times where, as a mentor, you need to just be quiet and listen and hear. And they don't want to have you pass on your wisdom and your knowledge because they're looking just for somebody to listen and hear who's non-judgmental and is 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 basically that is just being able to listen and hear what that person is saying. It's a cry for help, and if you miss that cry for help, something, the outcomes are not always pleasant. And so for me, that's one of my first ones: listening and hearing.
Yeah, and we shot a video on listening, the 7 elements of listening, and we'll put it in the show more notes if you want to check that out as well. I agree with you. Listening, 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? We hear that all the time, and it's amazing how people forget it. And I think you're really stressing the importance of the 2 ears and 1 mouth, and this notion of the listening. And we can't forget is sometimes we listen to what we see. And we've got to pay attention to that because obviously body language makes a big difference. And I know we only see part of it when we're on video, but you can pick up lots of things. Like if I start to drift away, one can catch something about, I'm not sure if that person's present at the moment, and things like this. So again, it is a really critical area, which actually moves into the second one. And I'm going to bring something forward here, and then I'll get Doug to come back with another one. It's really about know thyself. And that links up to then you can know others. The more you know about yourself and you have a deep appreciation for who you are in terms of being fully human, being natural, so that when you are a mentor in the mentoring, you're not in the sense bringing a mask of you forward. And this is something that we've got to pay attention to, is that sense of, oh, this is the authentic person that I'm interacting with because they feel enough in their skin. They have the confidence to be in that body, to be present with me as they're doing the mentoring. So this notion of know thyself. And what I would always encourage people to do is, you probably heard of things like personality assessments, okay? And there's all different kinds of those that you can go through. I did a slight switch because I love to play with words, and instead of personality, I said person abilities, about the ability to be a person. And that helped me to reframe when I learned a little bit more about myself and to come to know myself. I was able to really enhance my abilities. And that comes back to mentoring, the process of, and as a mentor, being a person of, a practitioner of, is the practitioner of the process, is that it really strengthened, gave me new ideas to be able to be present. And that's such an important part of know thyself, is to have the gratitude and presence of being there with the mentee. So is there anything you would want to share from your perspective about know thyself, Doug?
Well, one of the things that I typically will say to people is that knowing yourself is part of it. The other part that I see is the aspect of needing to be whole as a person. So, in other words, I can't be bringing to the relationship issues that I should have been dealing with before I entered into that relationship. And so part of that comes from obviously knowing yourself, but also knowing yourself at a deeper level, so that you're able to be in that position to be able to say, okay, I've taken care of all this stuff. I can now come. It's kind of like it's almost like I'm clear of my own personal baggage, and therefore I'm open, or I'm free to be able to come in and have that conversation with you.
Yeah, it allows you to communicate from commitment, right, and contribute from confidence. I think is another way of sharing that, which then is a great segue. Why don't we go into a third point, right? 3 of 5, and you're up. What would you like to share with us?
Well, the one that the another one that stands out for me is the aspect of the power of questions. And it's a great way, it's a great tool to plug in or segue into sharing your lived experience, and then, you know, coming back with a question. So, you know, I've I've done a number of things over the course of my lifetime. Here, for example, is one of them. What could have I done differently in those situations? So I'm helping that individual based on my lived experience. I'm helping them be able to utilize their critical thinking skills by guiding them by using the power of question to ask them questions, and get them to go through that process. So for me, that's one. I'm a storyteller by almost, I don't want to say by trade, but by nature. And as a result of that, I also am a person who believes in the power of questions, and I use that a lot to help my mentees think and think their way through things. Um, a good example was I've taken on a new, I mentor with the American Corporate Partners, and I've just taken on a new protege, and that individual isn't quite ready for us to have some of the deep conversations, and that came out as a result of the power of questions. It was asking some questions to get a deeper understanding of where they were and what they were thinking, and then as a result of that, I was able to say, we're not quite ready for us to go to take our relationship to that deeper, richer place that I know we need to go. We're not quite ready to go there. Is that what I'm hearing you say? And the answer was yes.
Yeah. So you're mentioning about the mentor asking questions, but it's also how do we as mentors help the mentees to ask great questions? All right. And when they do ask the questions of us, to go back to your earlier point, is listen to the question, make sure you know what that question is, and answer that question or clarify the question. I've um, I've talked to mentees over the years, and they go, "There's times where I ask a question of my mentor, and they down some rabbit hole, right? That doesn't pertain to what the
Yeah.
question I just asked." And I go, that's true. And I started to think through that, and what did that mean? And I think it's really important we understand about the importance, the influence of questions, what you're really trying to emphasize here for us. And I think that leads into something I'm going to share about continuous learning and development, is because as a mentor, one of your best practices, all right, that becomes a wise practice is continue to learn, continue to develop. And that's why the international mentoring community set itself up, was to be able to give the certification process, because it's a continuous learning and development process that allows you to just get better and better and better. Is because we use this evidence based learning approach where you're gathering your evidence and then reflecting on it so that you can deepen your mentoring practice, and at the same time as get certification recognition from the IMC to be able to continue moving you forward, moving you forward, moving you forward. So this notion of learning, one of the one of the key definitions that I've always remembered was learning is about the detection and correction of error. Okay. And I went, that's great, is because if I see something that's not working, and I can detect it, what can I do to correct it so that it doesn't become something that's even more of an issue for me and leans into that problem world, right? And therefore, to succeed, I've just got to know how to detect and correct the error before it gets to be a place of fail. And I can appreciate where the person who asked us the question earlier said, well, how do I not fail at mentoring? When we're turning around is how do you succeed at mentoring and the practices that go with it? You've got to play with this learning and development. And what do you do when you gain this information to knowledge to wisdom? It's an important element of your mentoring journey to serve as a mentor. Thoughts?
No, I would, as an extraordinary mentor, learning and development becomes part of your day-to-day activity, so to speak. If you're not meeting with a mentee or a protege and experiencing learning through that process, then you're doing research for a number of different reasons. In my case, it was lots of research in order to write my second book, and I'm already starting to capture ideas for the next one after, for the third one. So it's always something that's there, and we need to continue to grow. Um, what is it? When you stop learning, you stop leading, is one of the quotes from, and I'm trying to remember who that was, but it was one of the leadership gurus who said, when you stop learning, you stop leading. And so, that's kind of been a mantra that I've always adopted and tried to live by.
Yeah. And I think there's certainly sharing truth there. Learning and leading, right? It's really important. They sort of
Yeah.
go what hand in glove. I might be a metaphor there to work with. So I think what would be helpful here is as we start moving towards the closing down of the show, let's just recap. So the first one was the wise practice was.
Listening and hearing.
And I added to that as the second one is know thyself. Come to really appreciate who you are and what it is that you've got to offer. The third one was,
Power of questions.
yeah. And the fourth one is this notion of continuous learning and development and continuing to bring new ideas into what you're doing. And the fifth one was,
The fifth one is the whole aspect of, as part of your deep practice, there are administrative functions that you need to be mindful of and to have in place. And one of those administrative functions is a mentoring log. And if you take nothing else away from this conversation today, it's that I need to go and set up a mentoring log today. And I've been tracking my mentoring hours for years now, and what I find is that it's a great place. My log is a great place for me to go back to sort of review what we talked about last time before I meet with you again the next time, and so that I have an idea of, sort of what our path is and how I'm going to help guide get there based on reviewing of my notes.
yeah. So this fifth practice is very much from that recap, the listening, know thyself, asking the questions, continuous learning. There's some admin that has to go with that. And if you want to say another word is make sure you do your reflection in, reflection on your mentoring.
Yeah.
Can continue to improve, focus, and strengthen your mentoring practices. I think that's where we're that would probably be a summary, right, in terms of what we're attempting to do with how to set extraordinary mentoring using wise mentor practice. So as we do move into closing here, Is there any particular, Doug, aside from the book, I got that. Is there anything out of today, something that you want to share with everyone who's listening in? A good tip or reminder related to mentoring?
The one that jumps out for me is be present and listen and hear what the mentee is saying. And if you want to be successful at mentoring, if you can adopt those two, those are going to help you be successful in a mentoring relationship.
Okay, great. So just a reminder, everyone, the first and third Wednesdays of a month is the All Things Mentoring Lounge. They are live on Facebook and YouTube, and you can certainly join in with us, asking questions as you or as we move through everything that's going on. And from that perspective, if you have a question, you can always put it in the show more notes of a past video, a live stream, because we can pick it up and we'll bring it. That's actually how this one came about. Someone asked about, how not to fail in one of the other ones, and we brought it forward for this one. So we do go back and look at the comments and bring it forward. So we're attempting to work from this notion of a community approach, and community in terms of what's the level of commonness that links us, mentoring. What is the community of practice that is there available as a mentor in mentoring? But I believe what we're actually towards is this notion of the community of significant caring, so that as a mentor, as you're mentoring, you're caring in a significant way for the mentee, protege, learner who's sitting across from you. So with that, Doug, thanks again for another great show at the All Things Mentoring Lounge. I wish you the best, and we'll catch up to you again another day. And to the audience, again, remember, send your questions in, and we'll get you involved. So with that, everyone, take care.
Take care.